guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave. So, for today's flick picks, I've chosen Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. Yes, the VHS version of Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. And there's probably a reason why I have the VHS, and that is because I never bothered to buy the DVD or any other versions of this movie because it pretty much gets played year-round. Well, not year-round, but yearly. And that is Thanksgiving. That's, it's one of the very few movies that actually takes place during Thanksgiving. Now, I know Christmas usually corners the market on movies based on occasions, and, there's no shortage of movies based on Christmas or revolving around Christmas time. So it's nice to have a movie like this, just before all the Christmas madness begins, to, sit down and watch and laugh. And, I've been watching this movie forever. In fact, I still have memories of when I was a kid and when I first got to see this movie. I remember a bunch of my friends said I had to see this. It's hilarious. We rented it one night, and in my basement we did like a sleepover thing, and we were watching it all night long and just laughing, cracking up at the TV. In fact, there's even a scene kind of in the middle with Steve Martin. And if you've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. And I just rolled over laughing. It was one of those laughters where your belly is hurting. And when you're a kid, you find stuff like that completely hilarious. As an adult, it's still funny, but anyways. So this movie pretty much centers around Steve Martin and John Candy trying to get home for Thanksgiving. Steve Martin being the business guy who's pretty much a traveler on business, and you kind of see the dark side of when you have a job that takes you away from your family all the time. When you're a busy business person who's never home, even if you're not a business person, you could just have any job where you're just always taken away from your family. So when things like Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas pop up, you kind of try to make a point to be there for your family. And so that's what he wants to do. He never misses his Thanksgiving dinners. He wants to get home and see his family. So he's pretty much stuck there, but an airplane flight away from where he needs to go. He desperately needs a cab to get to the airport, and here's where John Candy's character comes into play. Essentially, John Candy steals his cab. He doesn't intentionally steal, he just doesn't realize that Steve Martin already hailed that cab. And so, right from the get-go, they're not really friends at this point. In fact, Steve Martin thinks he's a thief. And they kind of separate. And then they get back together again when now they're at the airport, and he meets up with John Candy and tells him that you were the guy that stole my cab. And he's like, what do you mean I stole your cab? I didn't steal anybody's cab. And then he realizes, well, actually it was pretty easy to hail that cab. And he's like, oh, sorry. And so they kind of work it out, and they sort of become friends while they're waiting in the airport. And then, of course, they separate again, but then they get back together again. Now they're on the airplane, and they're actually seated beside each other. And here's where Steve Martin really gets to know the character of John Candy. And, the first real impressions of him when he takes off his socks and starts airing out his feet. Now, I'm sure if that happened to anybody, your reaction would pretty much be the same. If you're sitting on an airplane and the person next to you starts taking off their socks and telling you that their dogs are barking and waving it around, and I think that would disturb anybody. I mean, that's just one of those gross things you would never want to have happen. Kind of along the lines of someone clipping their nails and stuff. You just don't want to have it happen. But anyways, yeah, so they're on the plane together, but the plane now has to land because of the storms and stuff like that. Too dangerous to carry on. So then, again, they have to meet up in the airport. And at this point, you're thinking, well, how are they just going to keep meeting up? But it just happens. And Steve Martin goes to call his family, whereas the smart John Candy goes to book a hotel. Because he's like, we're not getting out of here tonight. There's no way. Steve Martin's character is a little bit more optimistic and tries to, he tries to call his family, tell them, don't worry, everything's going to work out, I'll get home, no problem. That doesn't happen, and of course they're stuck there. So John Candy's like, hey, I'll let you come and stay at my at the hotel with me, because you're probably not going to find a hotel anywhere. And of course, they go off together. They end up in the hotel. And here's where they got to make it work again, because now they're in a hotel room with one bed. Makes sense though. Like if John Candy booked it for himself, he probably wasn't thinking, I'm going to need him to tack along. And so they end up sleeping in the same bed together. It's, there's a few funny scenes that happen throughout that part where Steve Martin has to use the bathroom after John Candy used it, and of course it's wet everywhere. He left his laundry all over the place. He even grabs what he thinks is a washcloth to wipe his face, and it turns out to be John Candy's large underwear. And that would just, okay, yeah. So they end up in having to make it work with the bed. So they get to bed together and they're laying there and whatever. In the morning, however, I guess they forgot they were sleeping in the same bed together. Steve Martin's got his hand around John Candy. John Candy's holding his hand. He gives him a little kiss on the ear, and then they wake up and they're like, why did you just hold my hand? He's like, I don't know. Why did you kiss my ear? I don't know. Where's your other hand? Between two pillows. One of my more favorite scenes in the movie. Of course, they jump out of bed. They're all, ugh, and start talking about football and everything. And they're like, that was, let's just forget that ever happened. So then our two characters now are pretty much working their way towards car rental. Steve Martin, of course, the luck, again, is not on his side. He gets dropped off in a parking lot with his ticket for his rental car, and there's no car. And at that point, he realizes that the bus that just dropped him off is now back on its way to the airport, I guess, or to the car rental place, leaving him stranded in the middle of winter in a parking lot. Now he's got to walk to the rental place and tell them they made a mistake. Of course, that's not going to be fun either. He's in his business attire. He's not ready to be walking on a dirty, frozen highway. So by the time he gets there, he's really pissed off. And here's where he lets the poor lady behind the counter who's trying to, plan her own Thanksgiving dinner, all cheery and nice, and he looks all pissed off. He's got his tie around his head to keep his ears warm. He lost his luggage at one point. He had or his briefcase. He's just a mess, and he's just really irritated, and he just wants his car. He just wants to get home. And of course, she just tells him that, too bad. And this is where he literally just swears in her face for about, a good 2 minutes of, swearing. And, I keep a clean show, so I'm not going to be swearing. But you kind of get the gist of what I'm saying. A lot of F-bombs. And she, at the end, just kind of cheerfully, tells him, well, the same thing back. And this is what had me rolling on the floor when I was a kid. Back when I was younger, when you're hearing those words in a movie, would literally, it makes you laugh. And especially in that scene where it's pretty much gratuitous at this point. And it's funny because the movie itself really is not that type of movie. There's not swearing throughout the movie. There's not, there's nothing really wrong with the movie outside of that one little scene. Like, it's like almost like if they just chopped that little scene out, the rating of this movie would probably drop. I don't know if they even gave a rating on this thing. Oh yeah, rated R. So according to this movie's restricted. And I think if you took that little scene out, this movie would probably be like PG-13 or something like that, or whatever the rating system was back then. It was like adult or AA or something. The ratings all changed. But anyways, yeah, so now they're working their way towards the train where not a lot happens on the train, and you see them separate. And you think, okay, well, now I'm on a train. Now I'm going to go home. Now I'm going to see my family. No, it's not going to happen that way. Of course not. The train breaks down. So now the two of them reconnect. So now they're back together again. You'll notice that that's a theme, pretty much a reoccurring theme through the whole movie, where they separate. They think that they're done with each other. Now they're back together again. And they have to do kind of the same idea. They have to find a hotel together. Luckily, John Candy has connections. He seems to be a traveler. He knows what he's doing. Where Steve Martin's more of that business guy who just books his stuff and just goes. John Candy's character seems to be more rugged and know how to, work his way around when stuff starts going wrong. So, I mean, it's a great pairing. I mean, the two of them really do help each other. But then there's a little bit of a, problem with their credit cards and stuff, so they run into that issue. They get the hotel they're in, that they have to spend the night in, they get mugged, so all their money is gone. And again, they're struggling to try and find a hotel. But without their money, they're kind of stuck in that situation where now how do we get home? And so John Candy comes up with a brilliant idea because he's got a career in selling shower curtain rings, which is a strange job. He's carrying around this trunk with him all over the place, so you got to wonder, like, what is he doing? Is he traveling salesman selling shower curtain rings? So he comes up with this idea to kind of repurpose them as earrings and other means of what they are to people in the airport to raise some money. And then at the end, they're back on the road, still trying to get home for Thanksgiving. And of course, at the very end, throughout this whole ordeal, I mean, there's a lot that happens in this movie. I don't want to run through every single scene. I just wanted to talk about some of the things that I thought were funny. They get to a point where now they're finally at the train and they're separating, and it's like, okay, he's like, have a good Thanksgiving, and then John Candy's character kind of just sits down, and Steve Martin goes away in the train, and he starts thinking back. He starts looking back to a lot of the scenes that, what they were going through, what they were saying, things that he was saying, and things weren't adding up. Things were not adding up for him. Because John Candy kept talking about his wife, but things were just kind of weird. So he comes back, he gets back on the train, goes back, finds him still sitting there in the airport, or sorry, in the train station, and asks him why is he still sitting there. And of course, the truth comes out is that John Candy's, the character's wife passed away many years ago, and he's just kind of floating around. He's kind of a drifter. He doesn't really have a home. He's essentially homeless. And so here's where it kind of gets, tugs on the heartstrings, where Steve Martin realizes that, I've been kind of a jerk to this guy this whole time, and he's really just been trying to help me. He's just trying to be nice, even though he's kind of a, bumbling idiot sometimes, or he did a lot of stupid things. He's still a human being, and he wants to spend time, he just wants to be around people. And so, naturally, he invites him to the Thanksgiving dinner at the end. And, it's another one of those comedies where you go from laughing to almost like in tears. I mean, the way John Candy kind of portrays the character, and I mean, it really gets to you at the end there. But yeah, that's pretty much the movie. I mean, there's a lot of other things, a lot of great scenes, a lot of comedy in this movie. One of my favorite ones. I can always watch it every time it's on TV. I never have a problem rewatching it. I love it when movies are like that, when you can watch it no matter what. You've seen it 100,000 times. You'll see it 100,000 more. And especially around Thanksgiving, because there's not a lot of Thanksgiving movies out there. There really isn't. And so this is definitely one that you gotta at least catch it one time a year. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Let me know what you think down below. Throw some of your favorite scenes down there if you've seen it. There's tons of them throughout this movie. I mean, I just touched on a few of them. Very few. Anyways, hope you liked the video. Hope you subscribe. Talk to you later.